Hello Internet Allies, how are you doing? So everybody has their own preferred method of communication, keeping in touch, etc. And the two main ways of doing this is either through calling somebody or messaging them or texting them or whatever. Today I just kind of wanted to compare the two, pros and cons of both, and basically which one I personally prefer as well. So here we go. So first of all, I'm going to talk about calling people. Now in this group I'm going to put phone calls and video calls in this. So I think the good things about calling people is that it is more of an instant response. It's a bit quicker to call people than it is to text people sometimes. Also, with it being more instant, I think that calling people is definitely more convenient in emergency situations as well. I think the good thing about calling people as well, as opposed to texting, is that you get to hear people's voices. You kind of get the tone of the conversation a bit easier compared to texting, whereas texting is kind of just written words and stuff. I actually do really like video calling people as well, I've found, because you can actually see the person you're talking to as well, even though you're not in the same room as that person. It's kind of the next best thing as to actually seeing them in person. So one of the major cons I find with calling people, or people calling me, is that I often kind of feel put on the spot. I feel with a text I can kind of think a lot more about what I'm going to say before I say it. However, the con of calling people and it being quite an instant method of communication is that sometimes that might not always be convenient for the other person you're calling. And what I mean by this is that, it's kind of to do with timing and stuff. If they're busy, for example, working or whatever, or, stuck in traffic or whatever, or driving home, then it isn't really the most convenient. I mean, I know you can do hands-free stuff, but I don't really like doing that. It doesn't really feel safe. People are busy, people have lives, let's be honest here. I think, if you are to call somebody, I think it's kind of polite to kind of give them a bit of notice. I mean, I know that with this weekly Zoom meeting or video chat I'm part of, we always arrange a date and time that's kind of suitable for everybody. Even though it is more sort of instant, I think you've kind of got to be kind of careful and be considerate if it's not convenient for the other person. So moving on to texting, messaging, etc. So what I'm going to include in this is basically, texting, WhatsApp, using social media messages, DMs and whatnot. So basically all these are going to be covered. So the good thing about texting, I believe, is that I believe you can pick up on that conversation in a text or a message pretty much at any time which is convenient for you. It also means that you can have a bit more thought about what you're going to say to that person. Yeah, so for example, if you are working, then you can kind of come back to a text message later on when it is more convenient for you to text or message the person that's just sent you a text or message and whatnot. Another good thing about texting, I believe, is that I feel you can kind of share more and get your point across more. You don't need to worry about being interrupted or anything like that. And yeah, I think it's just a lot easier to kind of share information and kind of share important bits of news and whatnot. And even share memes, pictures, etc. I know that some of my friends really like doing that. Or even little video clips, that you can find maybe on TikTok, or it could be I could send a TikTok to a friend. Whereas I think if I was to speak on the phone to somebody about a TikTok, then or a picture or a meme or whatever, I would have to describe it. And I kind of think it's easier to show people rather than tell people with those kind of things, because then you're just left to your imagination. So some of the things I don't really necessarily like about messaging, texting, etc. is I think it's just a whole sort of ghosting thing. I think texts and messages are a lot easier to ignore, and it's a lot easier to tell when they're ignoring your text messages. I mean, okay, I know that you don't need to pick up the phone when it rings and whatnot, but I think with texting, I think it's like a lot easier to like either like forget to reply or to, you know, ignore or ghost like people. And being on the receiving end of that, like that can be like really, really hurtful, especially if the person you're talking to seems really kind of like interested and invested in your sort of like friendship, your company, etc., or just seems really interested in you as a person, and you know, you get on really, really well. I think another thing that I don't really like about texting is that I find it harder to detect like tones of voices and whatnot in texts. Usually, like, unless you have like an emoji like put on like on the end of your message or whatever, like I do really find it hard to like read the kind of like tone, because like sometimes it can sound quite like deadpan and stuff like that, especially if I receive quite short responses. So, you know, it could be like, oh yeah, okay, or yeah, great, or cool, or whatever. You know, they could just seem like they're not interested and whatnot. You know, it could feel quite cold sometimes. So I think like it's a lot more difficult to like confront people over messaging people as well, because you know, I think if I needed to confront somebody, I would definitely prefer to do it face to face, rather than, you know, over the phone, over messaging, whatever. Right, now it's for what I prefer. Now, I'm definitely much more of a texter than a caller, to be perfectly honest. I only really like calling people, or will call people, or they'll call me if it's either for business purposes or if it's like an emergency. I definitely think with like, you know, more kind of informal stuff, like personal stuff, like, you know, when I'm talking to my friends and family, I definitely much prefer, you know, texting and whatnot. However, I do really like, you know, video calls. I definitely prefer video calls to, you know, phone calls, to be honest. You know, if you were to separate the video calls and phone calls, I definitely prefer video calls because, like I say, you can actually like see the person and like hear their voice at the same time. But yeah, there's definitely like pros and cons to both. But yeah, I definitely much prefer texting, you know, because I think for me, like, I like to kind of think about what I'm going to say before I say it. And with phone calls, you know, I do feel a little bit put on the spot sometimes. And I think like, because I have social anxiety as well, I kind of do feel like my mouth kind of goes quite dry when I'm like talking on the phone for like long periods of time, you know, without a drink or anything like that. Thanks guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know in the comments below whether you're more of a caller or a texter or whatever, what method of communication you prefer. And I hope you're on a wonderful day, guys, and until next time, keep smiling. Bye bye.